The vast space station hung like a crystalline jewel against the purple-tinted atmosphere of Trylar Prime. Its sweeping spires and elegant curves made it look more like an art piece than a diplomatic hub. Inside, the station's grand reception hall buzzed with activity as delegates from a dozen worlds mingled beneath floating light sculptures. Ji-Yun Park stood near one of the tall viewing windows, her small frame dwarfed by the towering Trylar diplomats who moved through the crowd. At 23, she was the youngest member of Earth's diplomatic corps, chosen for her sharp mind and attention to detail. Her dark eyes tracked the movements of various species, noting how the Trylar diplomats seemed to barely acknowledge the existence of smaller races. The Trylar were impressive specimens. Most stood nearly 3 meters tall, with iridescent scaled skin that shifted colors in the light. Their forearms moved with fluid grace as they gestured, and their elongated heads bore elaborate crests that denoted their rank and social status. To Ji-Yun, they looked like a cross between Earth's extinct dinosaurs and peacocks. She sipped her drink slowly, watching as High Commander Drell held court in the center of the room. His scales shimmered with deep blues and purples, and his head crest was adorned with precious metals that caught the light. He was explaining something to a group of admiring lesser species, his deep voice carrying across the room. "The Trylar Empire has stood for 10,000 years, he proclaimed. "We have guided lesser races toward civilization, showing them the proper way to conduct themselves in the galaxy. It is our burden, but one we bear with pride." Ji-Yun fought the urge to roll her eyes. The Trylar's arrogance was legendary, matched only by their conviction in their own superiority. She turned her attention to her datapad, reviewing the trade agreements that were to be signed later that day. As she scrolled through the documents, something caught her eye. The numbers didn't add up. In the section dealing with resource exchanges, there was a subtle discrepancy that would result in Earth receiving far less than what was initially agreed upon. It wasn't a simple error. The formula had been carefully crafted to hide the manipulation. Similar patterns appeared in agreements with other races. Ji-Yun's heart began to race. This was serious. The Trylar were systematically cheating their trading partners, using complex mathematical tricks to disguise their theft. She checked the numbers again, making absolutely sure of her discovery. Protocol demanded that she report such findings immediately. Despite her junior status, she had a duty to speak up. Taking a deep breath, she made her way through the crowd toward High Commander Drell. The Trylar noble was in the middle of another self-important speech when she approached. His inner eyelids flickered with annoyance at the interruption. "Excuse me, High Commander," Ji-Yun said, keeping her voice steady and respectful. "I've noticed some inconsistencies in the trade agreements that require immediate attention." Drell's scales rippled with amusement as he looked down at her. "And you are?" "Ji-Yun Park, Junior Diplomatic Attaché from Earth, sir." The surrounding Trylar diplomats exchanged looks of disdain. One of them made a sound that might have been a laugh. "How charming," Drell said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The little human thinks she's found something wrong with our carefully prepared documents." Ji-Yun stood her ground. The resource exchange calculations contain hidden modifiers that significantly reduce the agreed-upon quantities. It appears to be systematic across multiple agreements. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Drell's scales darkened to a deep purple, and his head crest flattened against his skull. The other delegates quickly stepped back, sensing the shift in mood. "You dare," Drell said softly, "to accuse the Trylar Empire of deception." "I'm simply pointing out a mathematical error that needs correction," Ji-Yun replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The numbers are clear." Drell's upper arms crossed while his lower ones clenched into fists. "Captain," he called out to a nearby security officer, "this human has insulted the honor of the Trylar Empire with baseless accusations. Deal with it." Ji-Yun's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "Wait," she started to say. "I have proof." The security officer's weapon made no sound. There was just a brief flash of light, and Ji-Yun Park crumpled to the floor. Her datapad clattered beside her, screens still displaying the damning numbers she'd discovered. The assembled delegates gasped, but none dared speak out. Drell looked down at Jai-Yun's body with complete indifference. "Remove this waste," he ordered, "and let it be noted that the human died of natural causes. Their weak constitution is well known." As cleaning drones moved in to collect Jai-Yun's body, Drell turned back to his conversation, as if nothing had happened. The other delegates quickly resumed their previous activities, though their forced smiles couldn't hide their shock. None of them noticed the small device in Jai-Yun's collar that had recorded everything. None of them knew that her death had already been reported to Earth through quantum channels. None of them realized that they had just started a chain of events that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. In the space station's morgue, Jai-Yun's body lay in a cold storage unit, her face peaceful despite her violent end. The Trylar Empire had killed her without a second thought, considering her death as insignificant as swatting an insect. They would learn, far too late, that they had just made the biggest mistake in their 10,000-year history. Humanity had been patient, peaceful, and cooperative, but they had never been weak. And now, the Trylar Empire was about to discover exactly what it meant to wake a sleeping giant. In orbit above Earth, warships that had been hidden in plain sight began powering up their systems. In secret bases across human space, soldiers who had trained for years checked their equipment one final time. And in the halls of Earth's government, grim-faced leaders gave the orders they had hoped would never be necessary. The Trylar Empire had killed the wrong species' daughter. Admiral Suho Kim sat in his dimly lit office at Earth Defense Command headquarters, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. The notification of Jai-Yun Park's death pulsed red on his datapad, its simple text carrying the weight of years of careful planning and patient preparation. "Computer, verify quantum signature," he commanded, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. "Signature verified. Recording authentic. Time of death, 1432 Galactic Standard Time." Kim closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the bright young intern he'd met just 3 months ago. She had been so excited about her assignment, so eager to serve humanity's interests. Now she was gone, killed like a bothersome insect by an empire that had grown too proud, too sure of its own superiority. His fingers moved across the datapad's surface, entering a series of commands he had hoped never to use. "Computer, initiate protocol Sleeping Dragon. Authorization Kim Alpha 709. Around Earth and throughout human space, hidden systems began to wake. In asteroid bases and underwater facilities, massive fabrication plants hummed to life. Orbital platforms that had masqueraded as communication relays revealed their true nature as weapon platforms. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers started shedding their civilian facades. Kim opened a secure channel to the Joint Chiefs. One by one, their faces appeared on his screen. Military leaders from every nation on Earth. They had all received the same notification. "The Trylar have made their choice," Kim said simply. "Operation Ghost Fleet is now active." General Santos, commander of the South American Defense Force, spoke first. "All our ships are reporting ready. The Trylar never questioned why we needed so many merchant vessels for our limited trade routes." "Of course they didn't," Admiral Chen of the Asian Alliance added. "They were too busy congratulating themselves on allowing us to have a few primitive ships. They never scanned below the surface modifications." Kim nodded. For years, humanity had played the role of an emerging civilization, presenting themselves as technically capable but militarily unsophisticated. Every diplomatic mission, every trade delegation, every cultural exchange had been part of an elaborate deception. "Status report," Kim ordered, and the responses came quickly. "Ghost Fleet Alpha, ready for deployment. Quantum strike forces standing by. Stealth carriers in position near all major Trylar worlds. Combat systems online and sensing." The deception had been total. When human ships arrived late to diplomatic functions, the Trylar assumed it was due to inferior drive technology. In reality, those ships were carefully mapping hyperspace routes and placing quantum beacons for the coming war. When human engineers expressed interest in Trylar shield harmonics, their hosts happily demonstrated their superior technology, never realizing they were revealing critical weaknesses. "Display tactical overview," Kim commanded. The holographic display expanded, showing the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. Green dots represented their hidden fleet, positioned over months and years of careful planning. Red markers showed Trylar military installations, their defenses analyzed and cataloged by countless diplomatic visits. "Begin Phase 1, Kim ordered. "All ships maintain quantum silence until synchronized strike time. No communications, no drive signatures. We move as one, or not at all." Across human space, soldiers who had trained in secret for years began boarding their ships. These weren't the simple vessels the Trylar had seen. These were warships built with humanity's most advanced technology, systems that had been developed in absolute secrecy. Kim opened a final communication channel to the President of the United Earth Government. "Madam President, Protocol Sleeping Dragon is active, awaiting final authorization." The President's face was grim but determined. "The Trylar Empire has shown us their true nature, Admiral. They believe they can kill our people without consequence. Show them their mistake." Authorization granted. Kim ended the transmission and stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. Somewhere up there, invisible to the naked eye, humanity's real fleet was preparing for war. The Trylar would soon learn that humanity's peaceful nature had been a choice, not a limitation. "Computer, send final combat authorization to all Ghost Fleet commanders. Operation timing set for 600 tomorrow." Message reads, "Remember Jai-Yun Park." Acknowledgements came in from across human space, brief, encrypted bursts that the Trylar's vaunted detection systems would never notice. In less than 24 hours, the galaxy's oldest empire would learn the price of their arrogance. Kim looked down at his datapad one last time, at the image of Jai-Yun Park from her diplomatic court file. She was smiling, full of hope and purpose. "They thought they could kill one of our own without consequences," he said softly. "They're about to learn that humanity protects its children." As night fell over Earth, humanity's hidden strength gathered in the darkness of space. The Trylar Empire had ruled for 10,000 years through force and fear. They had never faced an enemy like humanity, an enemy that had spent years preparing for this moment, an enemy that had turned patience and deception into an art form. Tomorrow, the galaxy would change forever, and it would all begin with a synchronized attack that would demonstrate exactly why humanity's apparent weakness had been the greatest deception of all. Admiral Kim returned to his desk, beginning the final preparations for war. The Trylar Empire had killed a human girl today. Tomorrow they would learn why that had been the worst mistake in their long history. The sleeping dragon was finally awakening, and its fury would shake the stars themselves. Commander Hae-Jin Lee stood on the bridge of the EF's Retribution, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the tactical display. The massive warship, hidden for years beneath layers of quantum shielding, hung motionless in space just outside the Trylar defense grid's detection range. "All ships report ready, Commander," his first officer, Lieutenant Park, announced. "Ghost Fleet is in position." Lee nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic representation of Trylar Prime's orbital defenses. The Trylar's pride and joy. A network of defense platforms and automated weapon systems that had protected their homeworld for centuries glowed red in the display. "Begin quantum shift," Lee ordered. "All ships activate stealth protocols." Around the Retribution, space itself seemed to ripple as dozens of warships phased into quantum space. The ships didn't disappear. They simply shifted slightly out of normal reality, becoming invisible to conventional sensors. It was technology the Trylar had never imagined possible, developed in secret by human scientists who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "First wave in position," Lieutenant Park reported. "Target locks confirmed on primary defense stations." Lee watched as green markers representing human ships moved into attack position. The Trylar's vaunted sensor network showed nothing. Their mighty defense grid, which had repelled countless attacks over the millennia, was about to be proved worthless. "Remember Jai-Yun Park," Lee said softly, then raised his voice. "All ships, weapons free. Execute." The attack began in complete silence. Quantum torpedoes, invisible to normal space, passed straight through the Trylar's shields as if they didn't exist. The first defense station simply ceased to exist, imploding as its quantum structure was torn apart at the subatomic level. Alarms finally began blaring across the Trylar defense network, but it was already too late. More stations vanished in quick succession as human ships struck with surgical precision. Decades of careful observation had identified every weak point, every vulnerability in the Trylar's defenses. "Second wave, begin your attack runs," Lee commanded. "Target their communication arrays. Keep them blind and deaf." The Trylar response was chaos. Their ships, finally realizing they were under attack, began firing randomly into space, hoping to hit targets they couldn't see. Their weapons passed harmlessly through the quantum-shifted human vessels. "Commander," Lieutenant Park called out, "we're detecting power spikes in their planetary shield grid. They're trying to increase power to their defensive systems." Lee allowed himself a small smile. Exactly as expected. Activate the resonance transmitters. Years ago, when human engineers had expressed such interest in Trylar shield technology, their hosts had been happy to demonstrate their superior systems. They never realized that every demonstration had been carefully recorded, analyzed, and used to develop weapons specifically designed to exploit the fundamental frequencies of their shields. The resonance transmitters activated, sending carefully calibrated waves of energy through space. The Trylar's enhanced shields, instead of providing protection, began to vibrate at their resonant frequency. Across the planet's defense grid, shield generators overloaded and exploded. "Trylar Defense Command is attempting to broadcast distress signals," an officer reported. "Let them," Lee replied. "Their calls for help will only reach empty space." All their quantum relay stations were disabled in the first minute of our attack. On the tactical display, more red markers representing Trylar defenses winked out. Human ships moved with perfect coordination, their AI combat systems adapting faster than organic crews could respond. The mighty defenses of Trylar Prime, which had stood for thousands of years, were being systematically dismantled in a matter of minutes. "Sir, we're detecting civilian ships attempting to flee the system," Lieutenant Park reported. "Let them go," Lee ordered. "We're not here for civilians. Maintain focus on military targets only." The battle, if it could even be called that, continued with mechanical precision. Human ships appeared and disappeared in quantum space, striking their targets and vanishing before the Trylar could even register their presence. It was less a fight and more an execution of a carefully planned operation. "Final defense stations targeted," the weapons officer announced. "Preparing final volley." Lee watched as the last of Trylar Prime's orbital defenses vanished from the tactical display. In less than 30 minutes, humanity had destroyed defenses that had been thought impregnable for millennia. "Send the message," Lee commanded. A tight beam transmission was directed at the Trylar planetary government. The message was simple: "You killed one of ours. Now you see what that means. This is only the beginning." As the message was sent, Lee thought about Jai-Yun Park, a young woman who had died simply for doing her job, killed by an empire too arrogant to imagine there would be consequences. Today was just the first step in showing them how wrong they had been. "All ships, prepare for Phase 2, Lee ordered. The orbital defenses were just the beginning. Now we show them what humanity can really do. The ESS Retribution and its fleet of ghost ships shifted back into quantum space, disappearing as completely as if they had never existed. Behind them, they left the burning ruins of the most sophisticated defense network in known space, destroyed with an ease that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity's peaceful nature had been a choice, not a weakness, and the Trylar Empire was about to learn exactly what it meant to face the full might of an enemy they had grievously underestimated. In his quarters later, Lee looked at the image of Jayun Park that had been distributed to all fleet commanders. "This was for you," he said quietly, "and we're just getting started." The next phase of humanity's response was about to begin, and the Trylar Empire's worst nightmare was only beginning to unfold. Supreme Overlord Krath's scales had dulled to a sickly gray as he watched the latest reports flood into the Imperial Command Center. His mighty throne, carved from rare stellar crystals, no longer felt like a seat of power. It had become a witness chair to his empire's destruction. Another supply convoy lost in the Vega sector. A junior officer reported, his own scales flickering with fear. Captain Sun Mi-Kang's ghost fleet struck again. No survivors. Krath's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. The human captain had become a nightmare figure to the Trylar military. Her ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before anyone could respond. Dozens of convoy escorts had been destroyed trying to protect vital supply lines. "Show me the latest strategic map," he commanded. A holographic display that materialized before him told a story of unprecedented disaster. Red markers showed systems lost to human forces. Yellow indicated worlds in revolt, inspired by humanity's success. The blue dots representing secure Trylar holdings were now few and far between. Supreme Overlord, his military chief, stepped forward. "We've lost contact with the Centauri sector. The humans' combat systems adapted to our latest encryption in less than an hour. Our commanders can't issue orders fast enough to counter their attacks." Krath rose from his throne, his massive frame trembling with rage and fear. Just days ago, his empire had seemed eternal, unshakable. Now it was falling apart faster than anyone had thought possible. A new alert flashed across the command screens. The human ghost fleet had struck again, this time hitting 3 systems simultaneously. Supply lines that had taken centuries to establish were being severed in minutes. Worlds that had been under Trylar control for generations were falling to precision strikes that crippled their defenses before they even knew they were under attack. "How?" Krath demanded. "How did they hide such military capability? Our intelligence said they were barely above primitive." His intelligence chief, scales now a pale yellow of shame, spoke softly. "They deceived us, Supreme Overlord. Every diplomatic mission, every trade delegation, they were gathering intelligence. Every time we demonstrated our superior technology, they were studying our weaknesses." Another alert. Another system lost. The humans' eye-driven ships moved with impossible coordination, adapting their tactics faster than any organic commander could respond. Traditional Trylar military doctrine, based on overwhelming force and rigid hierarchy, was proving useless against an enemy that could think and react at machine speeds. "Supreme Overlord," his communication chief called out, "we're receiving reports of uprisings on occupied worlds. The subject species, they're using the chaos to rebel." Of course they were. Centuries of Trylar oppression had created a galaxy full of enemies just waiting for a chance to strike. Humanity had shown them that the Empire wasn't invincible after all. A massive explosion rocked the Imperial Palace. Emergency sirens began to wail. "Human strike force detected," someone shouted. "They're inside the capital's defense perimeter." Krath watched in horror as human warships appeared literally inside his capital's supposedly impenetrable defenses. They must have quantum shifted past every layer of security, appearing exactly where they wanted to be. "Broadcast a system-wide alert," he ordered. "All ships to defend the capital. Communications are being jammed," his staff reported. "We can't get signals out." Another explosion, closer this time. On the tactical displays, Krath watched as human ships systematically destroyed every military installation around his capital. Their attacks were precise. Civilian areas remained untouched while military targets were eliminated with surgical accuracy. "Supreme Overlord," His chief advisor approached, scales now almost white with fear. Perhaps we should consider negotiating. Negotiate? Kraft roared. With primitive toe. His words were cut off as the palace's main viewport suddenly filled with the sight of a massive human warship appearing out of quantum space. It hung there, its black hull absorbing light, its weapons clearly targeted on the palace itself. A transmission cut through their jamming with insulting ease. "This is Captain Sun Mikang of the Earth Fleet. Your empire killed one of our people. Now we're showing you the consequence of that action. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally." Kraft sank back onto his throne, watching as more human ships appeared around his capital. They had been fools, drunk on 10,000 years of power. They had killed a human girl and thought nothing of it. Now their empire was falling apart in days, their mighty military reduced to helpless observers as humanity demonstrated what true power looked like. Should I prepare a surrender message, Supreme Overlord?" his communication chief asked quietly. Kraft nodded slowly, his head crest flat against his skull in submission. They had no choice. The humans had outfought them, and outmaneuvered them at every turn. His mighty empire, built over millennia, had been systematically dismantled in less than a week. As he dictated terms of surrender, Kraft couldn't help but think of the human girl whose death had triggered all this. They had killed her without a second thought, considering humans barely worth noting. Now humanity had revealed their true strength, and the galaxy would never be the same. The mighty Trylar Empire was falling, brought down not by brute force, but by careful planning, superior technology, and the determination of a species that had simply been waiting for the right moment to show their true power. And somewhere out there, Captain Sun Mikang's ghost fleet continued its work, ensuring that the Empire's fall would be complete and final. General Du Hyun Choi watched from the command deck of the HFY Harbinger as his fleet dropped out of quantum space around the Trylar homeworld. The massive warships, their true nature hidden beneath years of careful deception, moved into attack formation with practiced precision. "Status report," he commanded, his voice calm despite the historic moment unfolding before him. "All ships in position, General," his tactical officer reported. "The Trylar Defense Fleet is responding exactly as our simulations predicted." On the main display, Choi watched as the Trylar warships formed up in their traditional battle squares, a formation they had used successfully for thousands of years. It was a testament to their arrogance that they hadn't changed their tactics in all that time. "Commence Operation Revelation," Choi ordered. "Let them see what we've become." The human fleet began its advance. To Trylar sensors, they appeared to be the same primitive warships they had mocked for years. Outdated engines, basic weapons, minimal shields. The Trylar commanders probably expected another easy victory. "Enemy fleet is engaging," the tactical officer announced. "They're using standard attack patterns." Choi allowed himself a small smile. "Initiate metamorphosis protocols." Across the human fleet, ships began to change. Panels that had appeared decorative split apart, revealing hidden weapon systems. Hull sections shifted and transformed, quantum technology allowing the vessels to alter their very structure. What had seemed like primitive warships became something else entirely. By all the stars, a Trylar commander's shock transmission cut through the comm channels. "What are they?" The human ships accelerated with impossible speed, their quantum drives finally operating at full capacity. Years of pretending to be slower, less advanced, had led to this moment of revelation. The Trylar fleet's first volley passed harmlessly through quantum-shifted hulls. "Target their flagship," Choi commanded. "Show them what real human technology can do." The Harbinger's main gun, hidden for years behind false panels and sensor baffles, powered up. The weapon fired a concentrated burst of quantum energy that simply erased a portion of reality. The Trylar flagship, along with its supposedly impenetrable shields, ceased to exist. "Multiple enemy ships breaking formation," Tactical reported. "They're trying to regroup." But regrouping was impossible against an enemy that had studied their every move for years. Every diplomatic mission had recorded their battle drills. Every trade delegation had analyzed their response patterns. Every seemingly innocent human visitor had been part of the most extensive intelligence operation in history. "Launch the AI strike craft," Choi ordered. Swarms of autonomous fighters emerged from the human ships, their neural networks operating at speeds no organic pilot could match. They tore through the Trylar formation, targeting weak points that had been identified through years of careful observation. "General," his communication officer called out, "we're intercepting their command transmissions. They're in complete chaos." Of course they were. The mighty Trylar Empire had never faced an enemy who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. They had never imagined that the humans they dismissed as primitives had been studying them, learning them, preparing to take them apart piece by piece. "Their reinforcements are arriving," Tactical announced. 3 fleets incoming from the outer system. Choi nodded. "Exactly as expected. Execute Phase 2. Hidden quantum beacons, placed over years by seemingly innocent human merchant ships, activated throughout the system. The Trylar reinforcements found their carefully plotted approach vectors suddenly leading nowhere, their ships emerging from hyperspace far from their intended positions. Enemy fleets are scattered across the system," Tactical reported with satisfaction. "They're completely disorganized." The battle, if it could even be called that, continued with mechanical precision. Human ships, their true capabilities finally revealed, systematically destroyed the pride of the Trylar Navy. Weapons that had been developed in secret, tested in hidden systems far from prying eyes, proved devastatingly effective against defenses that had never evolved. "The Trylar command structure is collapsing," his intelligence officer reported. "They're beginning to realize just how completely we deceived them. Years of playing the role of an emerging civilization, of accepting their condescension with humble smiles, had led to this moment. The Trylar had never questioned why humans seemed so interested in their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. They had been too busy congratulating themselves on their superiority." "Send the message," Choi commanded. Across all frequencies, in perfect Trylar language, the transmission went out. "You thought us primitive. You thought us weak. You killed one of our own without a second thought. Now you understand what we truly are." The remaining Trylar ships began to retreat, their formations broken, their confidence shattered. They had finally realized that every interaction with humanity had been part of an elaborate deception. Every seemingly innocent question had been gathering intelligence. Every diplomatic exchange had been preparing for this day. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," Tactical announced. "The orbital defense grid is ours." Choi looked out at the Trylar homeworld, its surface now exposed to human weapons. "Send word to Earth Command. Operation Revelation is complete. The path to their capital is open." As his fleet secured their position, Choi thought about the long years of preparation that had led to this moment. The Trylar had ruled through fear and arrogance for 10,000 years. They had never imagined that their greatest enemy would be a species that had spent years playing the role of humble students, learning everything they needed to bring an empire to its knees. The revelation was complete. Humanity had shown its true face, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Yoon Hee-song stood in the center of the Trylar Imperial Palace's Grand Hall, her small frame a stark contrast to the towering architecture designed to intimidate visitors. The once proud Trylar leaders huddled on their ornate thrones, their scales dulled to ashen grays and browns, colors of fear and submission in their species. The same hall where Jae-yun Park had been murdered now witnessed the Empire's final moments. Massive view screens showed human warships hanging in orbit, their weapons trained on key military targets across the planet. Through the vast crystal windows, the burning wreckage of the Trylar defense fleet could be seen scattered across the purple sky. "The terms of surrender are non-negotiable," Song announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "The Trylar Empire, as it has existed for 10,000 years, ends today." Supreme Overlord Krath, his head crest flat against his skull, shifted uncomfortably on his throne. Just weeks ago, he would have ordered her execution for such words. Now, he could only listen. First, Song continued, the immediate dissolution of all Trylar military forces. Your ships will be decommissioned, your weapons destroyed, your armies disbanded. A low murmur ran through the assembled Trylar nobles. Their entire society was built on military might. Second, the release of all subjugated worlds. Every species you've dominated will be given full independence, with human observers ensuring a peaceful transition. Song activated a holographic display, showing the vast territory that had once been the Trylar Empire. System by system, it began to break apart into independent regions. Third, the complete reformation of your government. The imperial system ends. Democracy begins. Every Trylar citizen will have an equal voice. This is madness. One of the noble council members burst out. You cannot expect us to. A human warship chose that moment to appear through quantum shift directly outside the palace windows, its weapon ports glowing with barely contained energy. The noble fell silent. Fourth, Song continued as if there had been no interruption. Reparations. The wealth you've stolen from 100 worlds will be returned. The resources you've plundered will be repaid. She walked slowly around the room, making eye contact with each Trylar leader. You killed a human girl for daring to point out your corruption. You thought there would be no consequences. You were wrong. The holographic display shifted to show Jayun Park's face. The young diplomat's image hung in the air, a silent witness to justice being served. Fifth, education reform. Your children will learn the truth about your empire's history. They will understand why it fell. They will know better than to repeat your mistakes. Supreme Overlord Krath finally found his voice. And if we refuse these terms, Song's expression didn't change. Look around you, Supreme Overlord. Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are gone. Your armies are scattered. Refusing is not an option. She gestured to the windows, where more human ships were appearing from quantum space. We spent years studying you, learning your weaknesses, preparing for the moment you would show your true nature. When you killed Jayun Park, you gave us that moment. The terms continued, each one striking at the very foundations of Trylar society. Their caste system would be abolished. Their records would be made public. Their technology would be shared with those they had oppressed. Finally, Song said, a memorial will be built. Here, in this very hall where you murdered a young woman for speaking truth to power. It will stand as a reminder of the day your empire's arrogance led to its fall. She placed a datapad on the floor before the throne. Sign, and your people will have a chance to build something better from the ashes of your empire. Refuse, and we will find others among your people who will. The Trylar leaders looked at each other, their scales shifting through colors of fear, anger, and finally resignation. One by one, they pressed their ceremonial seals to the document. A wise choice, Song said as she collected the datapad. Human peacekeepers will arrive within the hour to begin the transition. Your cooperation will determine how smoothly this process goes. As she turned to leave, Supreme Overlord Krath spoke one last time. You destroyed an empire that stood for 10,000 years over the death of one human.